What's up, everybody? This is Joe from the Acceptable Casualties, and today we're going to be doing a tactics video for my 11th Armored Division at a market garden, the Black Bulls. We'll be back in a second to go over the list. So here is my stuff for Armored Squadron out of the Market Garden book, and I built them as the 11th Armored Division, the Black Bulls. This is roughly like 1670-ish, I think, but I usually play them as 1,500 points. I just put it all on the table so you guys can kind of get a look at what I got over here. I usually bring it down to 1,500 points, and it'll vary between if I decide to bring in the Typhoon that's down here, I will pull out the Universal Carriers and one of the Shermans. And then if I decide to play without the plane, then the Carriers, and I'll have an extra Sherman in this platoon down here. So that's kind of how I swing it around that 1,500 point total, roughly. I mean, there's some other minor changes as far as equipment goes with the Shermans and everything like that, but that's really what I'm looking at. So I'll just go down the list right now so you guys got to kind of get a better idea as far as what I have. So down here, I have one platoon of 4 Shermans with the Firefly, and then the command tank has the 50 cal upgrade on the top right there. This is a 4 tank platoon usually. Over here, I have a 3 tank platoon with 1 Firefly, 2 Shermans, and the command tank has that 50 cal. This 4 tank platoon over here mirrors the same one as before with the 50 cal upgrade for the command tank, and then the Sherman, 2 Shermans, and then the 1 Firefly. Up here, I have a 1 IC and 2 IC. Both of them have 50 cal upgrades. I have a unit of 2 Dingoes that runs as its own squad down here. They are an attachment that you get off of the Armored Car Squadron. With these guys, I run 2 of the Daimler ones, and then I'll have one of them, which is the Sawn-Off, and I'll give that the Piat upgrade so I can get some anti-tank over there with a little bit of mobility as well. And then if I end up taking the plane, I run the Typhoon with limited air supports of 5 dice. And if I don't, then I end up bringing in the Universal Carriers down here. I really don't give them any upgrades. I kind of just run them as a base unit. So this is roughly 1,500 points. I'll be back in a second to kind of show you how I like to set up my deployment and how I like to play the Army as a whole when I have it on the tabletop. So we are back, and this is kind of my standard deployment for these guys. I want to play aggressively because usually I'm going to be attacking since it is a tank company. So if I pull out this way, you guys will see it's usually pretty aggressive battle line. I didn't put any terrain on the table because I kind of like to leave it open so I can move stuff around and explain things a little bit better instead of just fighting terrain, because terrain's not going to be the same every game you play. So I'm going to start down here and try to give you guys an idea of what my thoughts are. So usually in the middle part of the table, working these units in, try to get a clear line of sight going across. I like to put the 2 4 units of Shermans right here with the 1 IC attached. Try to place the Fireflies relatively closer to the middle of the table, but not close enough to where a template can get dropped on them and they get hit at the same time. The reason I like to do this is because based on the enemy's deployment at this point, I can bring down a ton of firepower ranging from the middle of the table pretty deep into the flanks on both sides. And my thoughts behind that are, with the Fireflies, I want to be able to get as much out of them as I possibly can, and that has to happen early in the game because usually they're going to be a priority target because they're much more deadly than just having Shermans run around. So with these guys early on, I like to either push aggressively with the platoons and leave the Fireflies back, and by doing that, I can shoot the smoke and still get 2 shots off with those Fireflies. What I like to do is if I move this platoon up first with these Shermans, I'll move them in this direction up or wherever I'm going to shoot, position them. I'll shoot their smoke at a unit that I'm not shooting at with the Firefly, and I'll direct the Firefly's shots at a unit that hasn't been hit by smoke with those Shermans. And by doing that, I'm guaranteed that both of my shots with the Firefly have a chance of blowing up tanks. Because if you fire those smoke shots with these Shermans at the same unit you're shooting at with the Fireflies, I mean, you're firing 8 smoke shots. Even though you can kind of pick where they go, you're going to limit the effectiveness of the Firefly if you drop too much smoke on the unit. You might shortchange yourself and maybe only kill one of the tanks if you had 2 options. Or if you dedicate all of your smoke shots to one of the, to maybe just like 2 of the tanks in the enemy's unit, and then you miss both your Firefly shots, then you're going to be sitting there with one or two tanks that have a clear range of fire to return fire on you. So what I like to do is I like to split with that first unit. So I have all these guys here. I'll just shoot a bunch of smoke rounds into one enemy platoon that's maybe placed somewhere over there, smoke them out the best that I possibly can, and with the Firefly, use their shots to dump into another platoon of armor that might be over here and do as much damage as possible. And the reason I like to do that also is because if I do enough of damage with that Firefly on maybe like one of the armored platoons over here and maybe knock them down to 50% casualties or something like that, that opens up the option over here for these guys to where I can shoot with that Firefly and maybe those Shermans again and fire a full salvage, just a ton of shots down at that platoon without using smokes, in hopes of possibly just shredding the remaining tanks and either bailing them or just totally taking out the platoon in general without having to waste the shots of smoke from these guys right here. So first platoon of 4 with the one IC down there, the Shermans are in charge of shooting the smoke at an opposite platoon, and then the remaining Firefly and the extra platoon of 4 are going to be there to focus down on one of the armored platoons if they're in range and visible. So that's my thoughts here on the Shermans. If you push over to this flank a little bit further, I like to leave this flank pretty much wide open because I like to use these armored cars to push up the table edge and kind of just harass one corner of the table. Obviously, I'm not going to run them right at armor, but if there's infantry platoons over there or some mortars or something like that, I'll just set these guys up and I'll just plug away. I mean, I got 24-inch range with those Daimler ones. The sawn-off, I could just use the machine gun. They have pretty good options against infantry or even shooting against mortars or shooting against artillery. You just set them up and harass them. Since they're so small as well, you can find spots in terrain or like around houses or anywhere that you want to put them. And you can save them for late game assault. You can save them for late game to contest objectives. You don't have to throw them out in the mix too early. You can use them as a harassment unit. And if somebody gets too aggressive and decides to push tanks out of the smoke that we shot earlier and move up a little bit forward, you can use these guys to kind of go around. You get side shots on the flank because they're not going to be a super priority early in the game, especially if you keep them at a distance and out of sight of some of the anti-armor that the enemy's going to have on the table. So play cautious with these guys on the flank and just use them, give them like a special mission in your mind when you're playing and use them for that specifically. And if something opens up, just be ready to capitalize on it. They have really good range and speed, especially if you get them on open roads. And speaking of open roads, that'll be a good segue to go over to these guys. So down here are my dingoes. This is probably my favorite unit in this entire army right here. I love the versatility of these guys. If you guys watch some of the battle reports that I play super aggressive with them, and they really can strike from anywhere. I try to deploy them on roadways because they count as wheeled or jeeps or whatever they are in the book. But if you get them on the road, you can move like 24 inches on just your movement. So you can shoot them anywhere on the table super fast, and you can use them as a great supporting unit. You can use them as a unit to steal an objective late game if somebody doesn't really pay attention to where these guys are. I usually like to throw these guys up, not in a bad position early, but in a position where you'll be able to get some support fire, maybe help with pinning down units, things of that nature. Since they're such a non-threat on the offensive, they tend to be overlooked as far as shooting goes, or they're like a last priority on the table. If the enemy has nothing else to shoot at, they might go with these guys instead of maybe positioning to get a better view at a different target. So they're super cheap point cost. Yeah, they're easy to take off the table, but they're not a threat, so they're usually not looked at in that way. So I like to put them, like I said, at crossroads on the middle of the table, or maybe position them like I do with the armored cars and get them behind buildings and stuff, just use them to pull off on the ground or just harass with machine gun fire, but stay far enough out where they can't get assaulted by infantry, just to pretty much be annoying. That's the same thing what I like to do with the universal carriers. And if I do bring them on the table with that 1,500 point list instead of that Typhoon, I'll use them in conjunction with these guys as almost another platoon there to help support them. So you have, 5 machine guns bearing down on infantry. You might not do a ton of casualties, but you're going to most likely keep those guys pinned or at least peel on the ground off of them and make them easier to hit for some of your Shermans that you're going to be using mostly for your offensive assaults. So that's what I like to do with these two guys. I like to work them together. And then, late game, if there's an objective there with a whittled down infantry platoon or something along those lines, I'll use these guys to assault because, they're armored. It only takes 5 hits to break them off, but, they're at least you get a save in close combat with them. And if it's a whittled down infantry platoon and you get 5 of these guys in there, they're vets. You're going to do some damage, man, hitting on 3-ups as well. So I think they're a great late game unit. Both of them are for stealing objectives and really helping support the Shermans. Back over here on this flank, I like to put my other Sherman platoon of 3 and the 2IC. I usually like to run him by himself and give him like a little special mission to go take care of. So what I do with these guys is this is the Sherman platoon that I'm super aggressive with. I like to push up this side of the table if there's nobody over here as far as deployment goes, or there's no ambushes set up on the table or anything along those lines. I'll be aggressive with these guys, and I'll try to push them up the table and force the enemy to either really worry about his side armor or other things they might have with the armor he has on the table, and force him to maybe redeploy some of the anti-tank assets as well. So with these 3, I will push up at the Firefly and try to get him in maybe a better defensive position mid-table, and then set up a fire base from there with the Shermans. And then if the Shermans are able to survive that long, I'll continue to push them up and maybe link up with that 2IC a little further up the table, and then start working that back table edge. But it takes a lot of patience. I mean, you really have to know that you're not playing for instant gratification with this setup right here. These guys, you want to wait to make that push turn 3, 4, 5 when things start whittling down a little bit, and when some gaps start opening up in the defensive positions of the defender. So this is really just a slow, gradual push. Maybe pop a couple shots off, maybe move at the double just to get a better position behind terrain to make a play for the next turn. So that's what I like to use these guys for over here. Also to make the defender, worry a little bit, maybe, like I said, maybe pull some assets over there, spread out the middle of the line a little bit on the objectives, which makes the job easier for those 8 Shermans in the middle. Over here, I still have the plane. I didn't use them. I was going to talk about this separately right here. So for the plane, what I like to do with this, since I'm attacking most of the time, and if I do bring the plane into the list, you're able to dictate the usefulness of the plane. So I'll push up with the Shermans if I have the plane on the list, but I'll be very conscious of that 16-inch bubble. And what I like to use the plane for is to really harass any units that the German player is going to leave on that back line over there, whether it's artillery, mortars, maybe Pack 40s, things of that nature. That's going to be a deeper supporting unit. Or if they decide to maybe park King Tiger back there, or just some Tigers in general, keep that distance. I'll use this to try to really beat those units down a little bit, because obviously the Shermans aren't going to be able to do any damage to them. The Fireflies will, but the Fireflies are going to be priority number 1 for them to take out. So I'm not going to be able to get like 3 of them into the fight once mid late game hits. I'll probably be down to like 1 or 2 of them. So I'm going to use these guys, the Typhoon right here, to take out priority targets. They're going to be able to take out those Fireflies early on in the game. And by doing that, it'll make my life a little bit easier as far as staying in the game, because even though I had this many tanks on the table, they're Shermans, they're going to be easy to take out. Another thought I have with the plane as well is when I usually run this list I can play aggressive with, very aggressive because of the mobility. So I'll push up to the middle of the table, usually with this, and kind of set up some situations where my tanks are outside of 16, so I get that semi-indirect fire, and that leaves the plane to, like I said, fly around that back side of the table, and I can really get like 4 or 5 good turns out of it to try to weaken the enemy's objective defenses and things of that nature. So this is how I like to play the Armored Squadron when I'm playing with the Black Bulls. Fun list to play. I have a blast with it. I'm starting to add to it more and bring out some Lorried rifles to add to it, and some other units that I'm looking at as well. But I want to keep the force mobile, so that's the thing. So this is what I think as far as how I'm playing these guys tactically. If you guys got any ideas or any ways that you guys play that might help me out, let me know. Leave some comments, like or subscribe, all that stuff, and thanks for watching.